Everyone, you're watching Gen XR. This is Alan Tucker. Today we asked the question, can video games be used to teach history? We're going to look at an example of a game called Civilization 6, and then we're going to talk to a PhD professor to see if it can be used in the classroom.
That's what I would argue that our job is really about. It's not just lecturing and dumping information.
Okay, so let's talk about Civilization 6. In Civ 6, you pick a nation and start off with a settler and a warrior. From there, you advance your nation with political and economic policies, as well as technological innovations that progress all the way to the space age. While doing this, you must manage your citizens by providing enough food, amenities, and room for growth. You can build units, buildings, districts, and wonders to improve your town and give various benefits to your community. There are 4 ways to win the game: science, culture, domination, and religious victories. With science, it's a race to the space age. Culture victories win by having great works and great people, making a tourist paradise. Domination victories are just like they sound, capturing all of the other opponents' capitals through war. Religious victories are won through spreading your religion to all of the other nations. I decided, in my playthrough, to found my own religion and create the best culture possible. I created Buddhism and started a holy mission to spread our beliefs across the eastern continents, while creating great works such as Don Quixote and Romeo and Juliet. I soon found myself in a difficult situation. Now, I had to make diplomatic deals with other powerful nations. I continued creating great works as well as expanding my religion into other countries. This is where I met other religions and my missionaries started to fight. Soon, I started having more diplomatic disputes.
It's the Khmer Empire, the guy next to you with the level 14 city. He declared war on you, dude. Oh, dude, he didn't like the whole Buddhism thing you've been doing.
Alright, so I hope you're beginning to see all of the strategy that takes place in a game like this. But how can it be used in education? There's a history teacher that makes TikTok videos about using this game in the classroom. His name is Ryan Blotting. His information is just down below. Please follow him. In his class, about 3/5 of the class is taught traditionally, while the other 2/5 is taught while students play Civilization 6. They pick a nation, are assigned a unit project where they learn about the nation, so there is actual schoolwork to be done. While they are playing Civ 6, he takes notes and might even stop the children to tell them about events that have happened in history that they are repeating through the game. He says that this leads to more personalized learning. Okay, so this game has massive potential. Let's talk to an expert in the field to discuss the implications of using this in modern pedagogy. Please welcome Dr. John Beater.
I enjoy history. I was really not a history buff or history nerd, so I'm not one of those guys that started real young. Ultimately, my time overseas made me super curious about the American experiment. I fell in love with the American West and studying the West. And those are the areas that I ended up doing my PhD in. Teaching secondary school for about, for 11 years. I've been teaching at the university, courses in immigration history, courses in the American West, and then also courses about teaching history. So history methods course. What does it mean? What does it mean to work like a historian? But what does it mean to teach someone to work as a historian? So there's kind of 2 or 3 things I think that really stand out. I always tell my students that are going to go, that teach secondary schools, that we teach who we are as much as what we teach. Were they curious? Did they have a lot of energy? Were they reading? Did they talk about that in class? Did they have relationships with students where they really seemed like they cared? And did they approach it with methods that really grabbed your attention? So the ability to take a historical event and connect it to today's world, right? History is really a human story. It's our story. And so we have to make these some kinds of bridges between the experience of a 12 or 13-year-old or 17 or 18-year-old and our larger world. If we don't, it's just information that's just washing over them.
I was wondering if any of your classes, either classes you've taken or classes you've taught, where you've utilized games to kind of immerse yourself in the history.
I also taught economics. We would always do Monopoly. We did a stock market. We did little things within games, but what you've just showed me here is far beyond what I've done. It really is. There's a whole brand of teaching characters, they actually become the characters of that time period. And students each have to study what that character did at that particular time. And then they play it out. It's what you've described, it's the video game of what you have, only this is live, face-to-face with humans, and it plays out. It doesn't have to play out the way they know how it actually did play out, but it can also play out in different theoretical ways as well. So the short answer is you're way ahead of where I was. I did kind of mini versions, trying to kind of sync with historical experience with today's world, but what you're doing further down the road.
That is super cool. I would love to be in it sounds like a play. It kind of sounds like a theatrical play.
It is. It is. We learned, well, here's the deal. The research is overwhelming. You're going to remember 10 to 20% of what I say. 10 to 20. So which means the 80 or 90 is just going out the window. You're going to remember 80 to 90% of what you do. So much of what we do as teachers is to frame an experience for you that's going to exercise historical thinking skills and the ability to articulate that, write that, explain that, see the relationship with that. That's what I would argue that our job is really about. It's not just lecturing and dumping information.
Obviously this would be really cool, but the hardest part is implementation, right? The hardest part is taking this from theory to actually in the classroom. So I was wondering, what do you foresee as some challenges to implementing a video game like Civilization 6?
One is the relationship between historical fact and the student experience, right? We want to make sure that we're teaching things that are historically accurate, and yet we want them to engage in a live game. Do I want my students to have fun? Totally. Of course I want them to have fun. Is there a clear articulation of the skills that I'm trying to teach them? And am I clear? Am I able to articulate? Here's what I mean. We don't have any shortage, Alan, of information, right? We have more information than human society has ever had. What we have is a shortage of people that are able to effectively work with all of that information that we have. I want my students to have fun, but I also want to be cognizant of the skills that I'm trying to get to develop as we're doing this. And so as the teacher, I want to be able to say, what am I teaching? How am I teaching them to think like a historian? And can I clearly articulate that? And sometimes in history, the teaching of history, we haven't done that.
Have you seen any difference in student engagement as the years have progressed? Like nowadays, do kids focus on things more than past generations, or vice versa?
Yeah, no doubt. I would say on the whole, we tend to be reading less, and we're becoming increasingly visual. Just generally, this is a big thing. I'm painting with a broad brush. The common denominator, I think, is how we're trying to get them to think and to make arguments and see relationships and see what does it mean to be a historian? What does it mean to think like one? If I give you information in a matter of time, if I don't hook it, that information is just going to run right through your fingers. It's just it'll be gone because it's not connected to your cognitive field. You're not making meaning out of it. If I give you that information and you make meaning out of it in a video game, or you make meaning out of it in all kinds of others, synchronization of it or a debate about it. There's all kinds of methods. Now I internalize it, it becomes increasingly my own, not just something that we're exchanging back and forth, but something I'm internalizing, wrestling with it, thinking about it, making relationships to it. That's the power, I think, that what your project can do is, well, it's entertaining. It's what a whole lot of students are used to anyway. And it gets them active. It gets them doing something that's connected to the content that you want them to have. So we know, like in the example that you showed, seemed to me a lot about strategy, right? Alliances, who's doing what do you protect? Why are you doing that? Getting them to think about that parallels what the historical actors were doing at that time, right? And that kind of perspective is really at the heart of what history is about. History really at its core is about perspectives. There's not a narrative. It's an argument about a conversation about what happened. And so you're going to parallel that a lot in the video games because students are going to be talking about, well, why did you do that? What are you after? What were they after? That's why I think the compare and contrast is where the richness could come in. Compare and contrast what the game happened in the game and what we do in our unit. What's one thing that's similar and one thing that's most different, right? So then you start getting these comparisons, and then they're really finding it's the fact versus fiction. It's the same thing what you do in a movie. Because when learning takes place, when the blocks fit together, wow, it becomes much more meaningful than if they're just separated segments that aren't somehow connected. That makes sense? Do you see what I'm trying to say there? How does it connect to the other pieces that I'm doing in the class? We want to make this as seamless and as powerful as possible.
Ryan Blotting and what he's doing, I think, is really pushing waves in the field, right? And I think not just history, but just in general.
Sure.
And so, is there any final comment you'd like to end off on?
Well, I would say this. I think you're an example of what you hope happens in your class. And what I mean by that is, aren't you learning a tremendous amount by your doing, by all of your work on this? Think about how much you're learning about how do people learn, how do you structure things, how do you connect those things. And that's what I hope is so cool, is because the one who's doing the doing is doing the learning.
Yeah.
And what you're trying to create for students is an experience where they're the ones that are doing the doing, which means they're doing the learning.